Scrappy slapped Khaotic during the show, a scene from Love and Hip Hop Atlanta episode 15 of season 12. The city of Atlanta was filled with tension that day. The lights, the cameras, the high drama, all of it was about to explode on this highly anticipated episode of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. In episode 15 of season 12, there was a dramatic confrontation that no one expected, alliances changed, and emotions were running high. It was nothing short of combustible. The streets of Atlanta were buzzing with gossip, and the air was thick with the anticipation of a showdown. The cast was already feeling the pressure of the tension that had been developing over the past few episodes, while the camera team was getting ready for another day of filming. The atmosphere was charged with competition, and when two natural forces came together, it was only a matter of time before there was an explosion. The action takes place in a club in downtown Atlanta, which is famous for its extravagant parties and ostentatious customers. Khaotic, a character known for causing trouble, was the one who arranged the new event that took place there. Although he had made significant progress since his earlier seasons, the path to atonement was still filled with challenges and unresolved grievances. Khaotic was all about the grind, the fame, and keeping his status as an indisputable player in the Atlanta music industry. However, the main event today was not the music, it was the conflict between the different characters. Khaotic had been in a constant state of conflict with Scrappy, the well-liked Prince of the South, who was recognized for his charm, unrestrained enthusiasm, and straightforward way of living. Scrappy had his own journey on the show, which included dealing with his relationship with Bambi, family problems, and his public persona. However, there was an underlying tension between Scrappy and Khaotic that had been growing for weeks. The stage was ready. The club scene, a collection of intense feelings. As the cameras were rolling, the club was crowded with people who were accustomed to being in the spotlight, including rappers, producers, influencers, and of course, the reality stars of Love and Hip Hop. The venue was filled with flashing lights and loud, bass-heavy music, creating an exciting atmosphere. However, despite all the sparkle and splendor, the atmosphere was everything but pleasant. Scrappy entered the room, a person who was a silent storm. He had a calm yet assertive demeanor, and it didn't take long for people to start murmuring, "Scrappy's in the building." He had experienced enough to know when to be calm, but tonight seemed different. There was something about the ambience and Khaotic's presence that made him feel uncomfortable. Khaotic was already at the bar, laughing loudly with his crew. He saw Scrappy from the other side of the room, and the tension in the air was thick. What had started as a competition over personal differences had developed into something more personal. Khaotic was not the kind of person to avoid a conflict, and Scrappy's quiet but fierce personality had always made Khaotic feel like he had something to prove. It was a battle of egos, and it appeared that the two guys were prepared to engage in it tonight. The others in the group surrounding them began to pay attention. The cast members, who had witnessed their fair share of outbursts, exchanged knowing looks. Everyone could feel that an explosion was about to happen. The confrontation, Scrappy's patience is tested slim. Khaotic was determined not to let the moment pass. He walked over to Scrappy with his normal smile, but there was something piercing in his eyes. He was prepared to face a confrontation, no matter what it required. Khaotic shouted, "Hey Scrappy, I see you out here trying to act all tough." His voice was louder than the music. "What's going on with that? Do you really think you can come into my area and act like you're some kind of king?" Scrappy turned slowly, his eyes fixed in a steady yet inscrutable stare. He was already familiar with this kind of conversation. He had experienced drama, treachery, and real-life challenges that pushed him to his limits. However, Khaotic's behavior had always been a little too much for him to handle. Scrappy said, his voice steady but with a hint of sharpness, "I have no idea what you're talking about, buddy. You're the one who is trying to create trouble here. I don't have time for that immature behavior." Khaotic laughed as he moved closer. The camera zoomed in and recorded every moment of this stress. "Is this childish? No, you just don't understand, dude. This is a matter of power. You think you're the man around here? I am here to demonstrate to you that you are not the only person who can earn respect in this neighborhood." Scrappy's eyes became narrow. As the two men stared at each other, the music appeared to become less and less noticeable. There was no way to go back at this point. The folks nearby began to back away, realizing that something significant was about to happen. "What do you mean?" Scrappy questioned in a hushed voice. "Are you really trying to test me right now, Khaotic?" Khaotic stood their ground. I'm not afraid of you. You're all bark and no bite. You have been in charge of this city for a long time, but I am here to remind you who is in charge. With that, Scrappy's patience ran out. He stepped forward in an instant, raised his hand, and slapped Khaotic across the face. The loud sound of the slap rang throughout the room. The room became quiet. The aftermath, a city in disbelief. The slap was not only a physical act, it also had a symbolic meaning. For Scrappy, it was the result of months of being misjudged, insulted, and tested by someone he thought was taking advantage of him. Khaotic realized that he was not invincible. It was a wake-up call and a hard reality check for him. Khaotic staggered backward, shocked by the force of the blow. The slap had left a mark on his face, and while the pain was bad, it was the shock that really got to him. He had anticipated a brawl, perhaps some yelling, but he never expected this degree of hostility. He didn't respond right away, even though his hands were balled into fists. He hesitated for a while, as if he were attempting to understand what had just taken place. Scrappy held his ground, never taking his eyes off of Khaotic. The room was silent and uncomfortable, with everyone watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The cameras were recording, but for a brief period, it felt like time had come to a standstill. The air was so thick with tension that it felt like it could be sliced with a knife. At last, Khaotic spoke, his voice hoarse but full of defiance. Do you really believe that will fix anything? You think that makes you the bigger man? Scrappy took a while to answer. He inhaled deeply, causing his chest to rise and fall instead. He remarked in a calm voice, "You approached me in the wrong way. I don't have time for games. However, if you want to keep things going, I will take care of it." Khaotic's pride was hurt, but his ego was still intact as he slowly nodded. The crowd remained silent. Scrappy was not going to be allowed to have the final say. He spoke in a harsh tone, saying, "Scrappy, you haven't finished with me yet. This is not finished." The conclusion of episode 15, The Calm After the Storm. The actors and crew started to move away from the altercation, as the sequence came to a close. The atmosphere was still tense, and everyone was aware that this was only the beginning of the story. However, for the time being, the show had recorded one of the most intense moments of the season. Scrappy slapped Khaotic in a moment of passion, a confrontation that was as much about pride as it was about respect. The spectators were left to think about what would happen next as the cameras went black. What would happen next between the two men? Would Khaotic respond with revenge, or would he surrender? What significance did this moment hold for the future of the show? It was obvious that the drama in Love and Hip Hop Atlanta was not finished, and episode 15 would be remembered as one of the most discussed events in the show's history.